So the Shockwave at Drayton Manor, I think, is very special. In retrospect, I'm amazed that it was even built under the circumstances, because this is the only Intamin Giovanoa box track coaster that was built after B&M was established. Because of course you had Z-Force and the original Intamin Giovanoa stand-up coasters, and those were all happening. And then B&M happened, and they started doing their stand-up coasters and Batman the Ride and stuff. And then somehow, by some miracle, we got one more of these Intamin stand-up coasters in 1994. And I love this ride. I think it's unique because of it's one of those things where it takes place in a very interesting period of time. And it occupies, I think, a very special place in the overall roller coaster timeline, the overall technology timeline, sort of the last hurrah there, because Giovanoa wouldn't even manufacture anything for anyone other than B&M again after that. As far as the track, the boxy 4-cross track system went, until they started doing their own designs, and then they narrowed it down to the 2-across, and you had Anaconda and Goliath and Titan and that whole thing. But yeah, I'm really grateful that we still have that ride, because it's really a very unique. It's the last of these stand-up coasters from Intamin, even though it's not a stand-up coaster anymore.
And I mean, talking about stand-up rides, did you know that Drayton Manor was actually the first park to have an Intamin stand-up drop tower? So before Acrophobia, Stickers Over Georgia, or High Fall in Move Park Germany, which is a childhood favorite myself, Ben Huracan Condor at Port Aventura, Apocalypse had 2 stand-up gondolas, which I'm sad that it's gone. I didn't forget to ride it. But it's more about the story beyond the world's first stand-up coasters and stand-up drop towers in today's episode. And a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening. My name is Sean.
This is Alex.
Hey, you're listening to another episode of Coaster Kings Radio. And today's episode is going to be all about Drayton Manor and Paultons Park, which those two together may not necessarily be something you think of combining into an episode, especially now that I know that Loopings Group, which also has Pleasurewood Hills, is also in charge of Drayton Manor. I was could have combined those two parks. But these two parks are just enough substance on their own that I think we can combine them into one episode. And in our chronological order of the Great British Road Trip, which is the Great British Road Trip Part 2, Drayton Manor and Paultons Park, we actually did these two parks back to back, because our very first park upon arriving into the UK was Paultons Park. Right after London Heathrow, we drove over there. And then the park following the next morning was Drayton Manor, and then we went to Alton Towers. And Alton Towers was actually the launch episode of the series, so if you haven't heard it yet, go back to last week's episode. Check out one of our favorite episodes we've done in a while, I think, where we discuss Alton Towers. So yeah, this whole road trip is kind of out of order based on how we actually did things, just kind of on how we want to talk about it, and the photo editing and combining some parks into one episode. But yeah, today is going to be about Drayton Manor and Paultons Park. And Alexander, where do we start?
I think starting with Paultons Park. We started with Alton Towers because we couldn't resist kicking off the podcast series with Alton Towers, because it's such a great substantial park to start with, as far as talking about the UK and the roller coaster landscape. But chronologically, we did actually start with Paultons Park, and it's also, for anyone else planning a UK road trip, that's going to be a great place to start for you as well. What's interesting about Paultons Park and Drayton Manor, as far as how they relate, is both of them are kind of dominated by these giant kiddie areas, these almost park within a park, intellectual property focused areas. Drayton Manor with Thomas Land and Paultons Park with Peppa Pig Land, and the areas have become so large that it's part of the whole marketing for the resorts. You go to Paulton Park's website, it's not just Paulton Park, it's Paultons Park, home of Peppa Pig World, and then with Drayton Manor, it's the same. It's like Drayton Manor, home of Thomas Land.
Yeah.
So I think they have a lot in common. Paultons Park is ironically moving in one direction, where they're starting to embrace thrill rides and like attracting people in their 20s with their latest announcement, whereas Drayton Manor is moving away from that. They're moving more towards a Paultons Park type of product, where it is very focused on families and having like multiple family coasters and lots of kiddie rides and stuff. But again, I think two really interesting parks.
I think Paultons Park is really one of those new parks where they kind of like had a very clear flip in their direction, which was Peppa Pig World. And since then, it's been like an upward trend. So then they added the area with the dinosaurs, and rethemed some older coasters, and then built some new coasters, highly themed. And then they somehow managed to outdo themselves within the next big area, which was it Route 66? Is that what it's called? Tornado Springs. I was like, something here sounds off.
Yeah.
Route 66 was a cute name, though.
It's themed to Route 6. That's definitely one of the things.
Right? And then, and whatever's next, which will now be we're going to discuss it a little bit more in coming up, but, the retheme of the older area with Cobra, and that's now going to be like a whole Viking theme. It's really nice to see this park going from a really kind of sterile, classic European park to really turning into like a well-themed and high-end experience. And ticket costs does reflect that, because tickets to Paultons Park are not cheap. It's one of those like pricing out your... pricing for what kind of attendance and clientele maybe you want, or like pricing for what you're worth, and therefore you can reinvest and build nicer themed lands, because they charge a lot of money, but anytime they invest into themselves, it is like a nice new addition. The park is very polished, even though it's not busy. The operations are efficient. It's, you pay for an experience that's kind of elite. It's definitely like a pristine experience. It costs a lot, but what you get is very clean and polished. Which in Drayton Manor's case, I think is they're on the upswing, but obviously the ticket price is much lower and the quality is also kind of lower. Yeah,
definitely. Drayton Manor is in the middle of a renaissance. It's kind of the Thomas Land stuff happened in 2007, 2008, and that was like a much needed boost for them. But they have also had a lot of struggles since then, and their acquisition by Loopings Group in 2020, I think, is like where we're now seeing a major change in the direction of the park. And Loopings Group, they have a good formula, I think, for these small and medium-sized parks. They've all got like, one looping coaster and some family rides and stuff. They're very eager to take traditional parks and give them themed areas and continuity and stuff. Alta Towers is just barely about to start embracing like the whole themed area.
Oh, you mean Drayton Manor, yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry.
which is true. It's funny because, the formula really is true. Alex and I were discussing it quite a bit lately, because we went to Pleasurewood Hills, and I was like, this feels a lot like Avontuur by Hellendoorn. And then Driefvliet in the Netherlands is also really turning into that kind of aesthetic. And then Fort Fun has been doing that. And then they all have like one signature looping coaster, like Alex said, and a family coaster. And now you're also kind of really seeing that with Drayton Manor, where it's like, all right, so they have... this new western area they're building that they're kind of focused on making it an area, which then kind of incorporates, in a way, the family boomerang. I mean, they're not quite there yet, but they're definitely working on it. Yeah,
they're working on it.
So the first park we're really gonna just deep dive into, I take it, will be Paultons Park, right?
I think we'll start with Paultons. I think that's a good place to start with this episode. There's like less to talk about with Drayton Manor, but there's also more to talk about. Each little thing to talk about with Drayton Manor is like a little more substantial. Paultons is a little more straightforward, like from a history standpoint and from like a legacy standpoint, and from somebody who's been studying parks in the UK since the 90s. Like Paultons Park is very recent in its substance. I mean, I went in 2015 and it was still quite small. It just had the 3 coasters, Cobra, Caterpillar, which is their little kiddie coaster, and then the tiny dinosaur coaster. Really, they only had one major coaster, which is their Gerstlauer bobsled Cobra. And at the time, Peppa Pig World was the only really like themed area. Everything else was just sort of the park.
Every park in the UK needs to have like an IP-based family, like kids area, and it's one of the only markets I've ever really been to where it's so consistent. They're so consistent because if you go to Drayton Manor, you have Thomas Land, you've got Peppa Pig World at Paultons Park, you have
CBeebies
CBeebies Land at
Land.
Alton Towers.
Chessington is doing Paw Patrol. That's going to be there.
Nickelodeon at Blackpool.
Blackpool, yeah.
So like many of like the signature parks in the UK have that formula. And first, but it kind of makes sense. I feel like in many cases it was kind of like the saving grace or like the restart of a park, and that's the case with both Paulton and Drayton. And for this episode, but yeah, it's kind of interesting when you think about that. I feel like I haven't seen such an IP based almost formula just applied to all the parks, and somehow it's been such a success.
And it's like necessary. It has worked really well for almost every park that has done this sort of thing. It seems to have worked really well. So I'm really happy to see that Peppa Pig was what catapulted a place like Paultons Park into the stratosphere, or like in the case of Drayton Manor, Thomas Land, like saving Drayton Manor, because like Thomas Land is beautiful. Like we'll talk about Peppa Pig World. And I think it's a nice area, but it's not like super.
What's funny is Peppa Pig World was clearly like the transition, and it's still the marketing genius of the whole park. Mm-hmm. But to me, it really does clearly feel like the first area of like the new Paultons Park, because then it feels a little bit sterile, and there's definitely like a really big focus on the IP that they spend a lot of money on, and it's just like the Peppa Pig Worlds in Florida and Dallas and Texas. It's kind of sterile and blocky and kind of concretey, but then. When you think about, and I'm really bad with the Lost Kingdom is the name of the area, right? Like the dinosaur area.
The dinosaur area.
Then you can really see like vegetation and like high quality theming and a bunch of animatronics. I mean, I'm amazed. Like you walk through the lock flume is the size of a backyard, but then the theming is incredible. And then you have animatronics that are sitting on like the Q house. Stuff like that is really impressive, and you can really tell that right now we're putting them on like 4 Velociraptor animatronics in the queue of the family Boomerang, stuff like that. It's very good. And then they had Tornado Springs, and that's when you really notice, okay, now another step up. Now we're not just putting animatronics into places; we're putting a ton of details. I mean, I'm talking Disney level details. I mean, the queue just alone for the spinning roller coaster. Absolutely incredible. Like, I cannot believe it. How nicely detailed it was and themed in the music and the atmosphere. And then you had the little barnyard flyer thing. What was it called again? Farmyard flyer.
I mean, so many details, so much dumpster diving went into building this beautiful landscape of reclaimed and like just artifacts of middle America. Just like anywhere you look in that area and you just look in any particular direction, and it's like you got to soak it in because there is so much to look at. There's so much to see. It was like they added more and more and more. Like every corner of that area, they were like, "Oh, we could do more. We could add something else here. We could do another focal point here. We could add another theme element here, or more plants or trees over here." Like that area is unbeatable in my mind. Like I beseech you to find me an area that is as detailed or more detailed than what Paultons Park accomplished with Tornado Springs.
Yeah, I think I agree, which makes me very excited for their future land that they're going to build, which is now going to be like the retheming of where Cobra is, which is the park's original bobsled coaster from Gerstlauer. That's going to be integrated with a new Gerstlauer Eurofighter. That's going to have 2 inversions. This will be the first inversions in the park, which is going to be nice. So they're kind of moving into the next foray. I feel like the rides kept getting more and more thrilling
for them.
Because first it was like, all right, so now, first you have the Peppa Pig stuff, you have a Family Zero roller coaster, then you're moving into the Family Boomerang and a Family Suspended coaster, then you're moving into like a pretty intense spinning coaster from Mack Rides, and now we're moving into building a Eurofighter with inversion. So it's kind of fun seeing that happen. So the new area is called,
I can never really pronounce it, Realm of Kings.
Yeah, which is cute, which is Viking themed. I think Vikings are back in.
Everybody has a Viking area. It's just what you do now.
It's like a big thing now. Yeah, Vikings. Yeah. Everyone's got a Viking area.
In 2022. All the loopings parks are going either have a Vikings area or are going to have one eventually.
100%.
Everybody loves Vikings.
And then, Yeah, I think that will really kind of complete the park because right now there seems to be a bit of separation. So where Volgarm is coming, and it's going to
That's
have
like the
the
last piece of the
Eurofighter.
puzzle.
It feels like,
Hmm.
yeah, it feels like, all right, this is clearly like a midway that it leads to like the original old part of the park and it really needs some love. And now it's going to get some love. It's going to kind of fill in the space between Lost Kingdom and the current Cobra area. And then the whole park is pretty flush. It's honestly kind of a big park. They also have zoo exhibits, which admittedly we didn't really do many of them. We walked through some of them in the gardens.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, we saw the
right?
ringtail lemurs.
Yeah, those are pretty cute. And so, yeah, I guess we'll go do a quick tour around the park and then we'll just talk about our experience. Besides what the park is going to get. So, when we first entered the park, we just landed from Heathrow, so we're kind of tired, and we just hit Cobra first, actually, because it was,
I think
I
Cobra
think, a
is the
highest
right place
priority
to
for us.
start. Yeah.
Yeah. And then so we started there. We got a couple rides in before it got busier, which Cobra runs great. It's the same layout. Isn't it the same layout as the Thor's Hammer? Am
Yeah,
I
and
crazy?
just in Dessau at Olympus Park Trip Stroll, it's all the same layout, except that Cobra doesn't have the additional helix at the very end. It just has one helix before the brake run.
Okay, yeah.
Uh,
So I
Thor's
didn't
Hammer
really look
and
into details
St.
too much,
Dessau
but
both have an extra helix before the brake run there.
and it does
Otherwise,
run
they're
quite
exactly
well.
the same.
Yeah, I think it runs
Mhm.
very well. It's smooth. It's comfortable. I mean, it's exactly what you want from a Gerstlauer. Bob said they age beautifully, and that's because Gerstlauer comes in every year and takes care of the ride. So every year, Gerstlauer does the annual maintenance and the off season for the coaster, and it runs like a dream. It's a great ride,
Gives
but
me
it's
high
very
hopes for
sterile,
the Eurofighter.
right? Because your fighters, I don't know, they're not created equal. But if maybe Gerstlauer was taking good care of it, it's worth it. And then you
Yeah.
have um the problem with that area is that it's just very sterile. There's
Yeah.
barely any theming. I mean, I cannot believe how incredibly sterile it is. It's just a
A
queue. It's
parking
just,
lot. It's just,
yeah,
yeah.
it's just yellow switchbacks in a gray metal roof building, and there's really
Yeah.
not anything to talk about except for the layout of the ride. So getting to see that that's going to get enhanced with theming and colors is going to be nice.
Yeah.
Like a second lease on life, and then the Eurofighter is going to interact with it quite a bit. It's going to be all kind of around it. So I'm excited for that. That'll be nice.
Me too.
And they were teasing a water ride for the year after, right? So that people
Mhm.
are saying it may be a water coaster from Mac, which would be a cool fit. It means Viking themed. They don't have
Perfect.
any big wet rides, so
Yeah, they don't have a
right.
major marquee water ride right now. They really just have like the slides, the classic, water slides or dry water slides that lots of European parks have, and then a small log flume. That's about it.
Yeah, so it's not that much that they've got going on. So I'm looking forward to that. And then so after that, we went to the Lost Kingdom, which is probably not my favorite area. But when I first went into it, I was like, oh, it's gonna be my favorite area because I like the vegetation, I like all the animatronics, two Vekoma models, which is great. I love the Vekoma suspended family coaster, and their version is a copy of the one in Fun Spot Orlando. So it has like that Freedom Flyer kind of a long layout, swinging back and forth, beautifully themed, rockwork, tunnels. I thought it was great. I thought it was
Mhm.
beautiful. Very, very nice area for the park.
Lots to do.
And lots to do. I mean, they have three
Three
roller
roller
coasters.
coasters. Hmm.
Then they have a log flume. They got a little Jeep ride.
Hmm. They have the
Probably a flat if I'm
little
forgetting.
crazy daisy type ride with the little eggs, the little dinosaur eggs.
Yeah.
It's like under the
Um,
engine.
and the way it's kind of built is that like if you do one ride, the exit usually spits out near the entrance of another ride. It feels
Hmm.
very natural the way you can just do all the
Yeah.
rides. Because like we did the flyer first, and that kind of spit out right where the entrance to Velociraptor was.
Hmm.
And that spit out right where the little dinosaur coaster was, which I'm really bad with names tonight. For the record, guys, I've been up for 24 hours at a time recording, so I'm gonna blank on a lot of things. But Alex is here to say, what's the dinosaur coaster called again?
I can't remember. It's. I think it's
Oh,
Dino Chase. Dino
Dino
Chase.
Chase. There you go. That sounds
Yeah.
right. Dino Chase.
Yeah.
Cute little ride, very well themed.
I
Alex had
actually
photos of
rode
it
Dino
for
Chase
when his
in
first time.
2015.
Yeah,
Yeah. When it was
and
still
then like
Frog.
comparing it, it was so pretty now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very pretty.
Yeah.
So,
Thematically, go ahead.
no, go ahead.
I think Paultons, I mean, back in the day when Paultons was starting to expand and really do major rides, they were just rides. Like they were not really concerning themselves with anything more than utilitarian functions for their rides. And it's been great to watch them blossom into a park that was just kind of dabbling in themed stuff, like with the Peppa Pig area and Critter Corner, which is the little tiny area that surrounds the Caterpillar, which is the Zero family coaster, to like moving into the Lost Kingdom, and then graduating to Tornado Springs. And it makes me very excited for the Viking area, if it's going to be like Tornado Springs level of theming.
Yeah, I agree. I'm excited for that. And then I guess we'll just talk about the Tornado Springs area next. First of all, every area does have like a major food outlet, I think, and the people were buying food at this park like crazy. I couldn't believe the amount of restaurants and the food courts that were full of people. Even though the park didn't feel that busy, so I guess good for them for the food and beverage revenue. But there's like a really prominent restaurant in Tornado Springs, and that thing was packed.
Oh yeah, the little
And
train station restaurant.
well, no, not even that one.
Oh
There's
no,
the
that's the
one
other one. No, you're
the
right.
burger
Yeah,
one that's between kind of the big
between the
turnaround
car ride
of the
and
ride.
like the
Yeah, and then
playground.
like pendulum
Yeah.
ride. It was like a saw theme. Either way, it was a kind of a nice indicator to see that the area is very healthy. Because when you walk in, you have a little car ride that I think was actually there before that they rethemed,
Yeah,
and then
that was
overhead you
and
have a track of the spinning roller coaster, which actually is a copy of the one at
Knott's
Knott's
Berry
Berry
Farm.
Farm, Sierra Sidewinder, except for the support structure and the track is an updated version. So it definitely feels almost sturdy because the one at Knott's Berry Farm will shake. Like you'll see the whole structure shake. This thing is very much like a more modern Mac where it doesn't do any of that. But the way that the ride is situated, you think, oh, it's a model, it's a clone, but there's just the way they made it really work. Because when you enter, it's kind of overhead and it's spinning. So, tornado, and then you have the restaurant and the first ride right there. And then the rest of the spinning coaster just kind of takes place in the center of the land between the water slides that are original, which were rethemed, and a couple of the other attractions they added, which makes me really hopeful for the new Viking area because they know how to reuse something to make it really look like it's been part of the new expansion, despite it being older than that.
With reincorporating the kiddie coaster in the dinosaur area, reincorporating the 3 or 4 rides that were around Tornado Springs, because the tractor ride was also there originally. So that's
right.
An obvious. That was a perfect. Like it felt like it was meant for that area, but it was actually already there.
And of course, doing like an area that's themed to, again, Route 66, and it's kind of like Tornado Springs is obviously Midwest America.
I love that
tornadoes.
theme.
And what is more thematically appropriate than putting a bunch of like, car license plates everywhere and putting tractors and putting farm machinery
farming
and
equipment and old cars.
And like being kind of deserty and the Great Plains, like landscaping wise, it is honestly not very difficult either. You only need a bunch of mature trees. Scrubbage is half the work, which they did a great job with that. The train in the park runs through it, so that obviously adds to the whole like Midwest America vibe that they're going for. And it's obviously rustic. But I will say what really makes this area so great for me is because thematically, we've seen it before. European parks love the American West. They love America themes. But the details were just insane. I feel like every wall you looked at, the queue for this little car ride at the entrance of the area was like a garage, and they had like cars hanging out. And it was all just so well themed and so many details. I was like, this is the kind of details you see like a Disney park. It even felt more detailed and intricate than a lot of Disney or Universal areas, because sometimes Universal Disney areas can feel a little bit sterile. Like they feel high quality, but they can be a little bit sterile. There was so much character in this land, like a lot of character, in my opinion.
I think they have the luxury of being a small regional park, and there's a lot of details that are kind of delicate and things that like you couldn't trust the masses with at like a Disney park or a Universal park. It makes me think of like Radiator Springs, because the areas have very similar flavors. They take place geographically in similar places, and it just felt like a more beautiful and intricate Radiator Springs, where details and stuff, things like little license plates on flower pots and stuff, like you just can't trust the masses to respect those kinds of things. They get destroyed. I mean, every time Disney or Universal opens a new park, like when Runaway Railway opened at Disneyland, and like the walk through the queue through the movie theater was like destroyed. People were like ripping parts of it off like on the first day. And this is just not an issue that a place like Paultons Park has to deal with. So like they find these things, they set them up, they're there, you can see them, you can touch them, and they don't have to worry about them getting destroyed by the
Also, this really
clientele.
feels like a passion project. Whoever's in charge of creative design there, because they must
Oh
have really
yeah.
gone and traveled around and like bought license plates and gone on antique shopping, and
Mhm.
they probably went on a great road trip through the U.S. to the smallest freaking
Absolutely.
towns and like bought a bunch of cool stuff.
Hmm.
And I mean, like, I can just feel like there was a lot of passion in this project in a way that, like, of course, dinosaurs. Where are you gonna buy? You can buy antiques for dinosaurs. You can buy cool license plates. That's it's very much a more rudimentary, very popular theme, of course, but it's not. You don't get to be as creative, I think, with dinosaurs because at the end of the day, dinosaurs are dinosaurs. Like velociraptors are velociraptors. There's not as
That
much
was
room
just a
for
little bit more straightforward. That actually felt a little
yeah.
bit more like universal, and the sort of like there's not a whole lot of things to like touch or see or look at. It's a lot of rock. It's a lot of landscaping. It's just theming, and then we go to Tornado Springs, and it's like artifacts. It's like history.
It's just
It's
art, actually, the way they put it
industry.
together.
It's
Because
everything.
then I want to talk about Farmyard Flyer for a second. So Farmyard Flyer is just a family zero coaster, smaller model. In a way, you think, why would this park need that? Because the park has two other zero family coasters. Plus, I
Uh,
mean, it's a family coaster
it's
feast
a
over
kiddie
there,
coaster buffet. Like, did they need another
right? Like,
one?
there's so much of it. And then they built this thing, and it's so elevated by the fact that the queue is very pretty, the station house is very pretty. And then the actual ride just includes a helix off the lift and like a little, not even an airtime hill, like a little hill. And then they turn back to the station, right? Like, super basic, rudimentary layout. But then it goes around one of those control towers, like it has a little airstrip, it has a little planes parked in the airstrip.
Like,
It's
so
thematically
great.
so wonderful. You're like, we loved it. We stood there and
I
filmed
couldn't
about it for a
stop
while,
taking
took
pictures
photos.
of it.
Yeah, it was such a beautiful ride. And it's that kind of dedication that I really always miss in the US. When we go to parks in the US, it's like, man, they would never make a kiddie coaster look that cute. Even Disney Universal haven't made a cute kiddie
Yeah,
coaster look
no
that
way.
cute.
Yeah.
Like Roller Coaster or like Gadget Goes, like they're
Yeah,
nothing
that's
compared
a great
to
example. That's a great
Farmyard
example. What
Flyer.
Universal just did, or what they just didn't do with DreamWorks Land, doing kind of like the bare minimum versus like what a park like Paultons Park did for this Tornado Springs area. It's just like night and day. Night and
And
day.
the thing is, like, you're right about some things. Like, okay, well, mass attended parks like Disney, Universal, some of the stuff will just get ruined by guests, right? Like if you're in the queue for something, you get peeled off or gets touched or whatever.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is theming around the ride where no people are going to be able to touch it. People are going to be able to like vandalize it. So why are the kiddie coasters at major parks like Disney and Universal, including Beijing, including Osaka, like I'm talking everywhere? Why is the level of theming still kind of really basic compared to stuff like a Farmyard Flyer? So Paultons Park, I mean, I guess my point here is it really is like super high quality for like what is kind of just like a regional family park. There's just a lot of quality. And like, even though I had mad sticker shock and I ended up buying tickets on Klook because I was like, how are we going to spend this much this
This
much
was
money
the
on
most
like a half
expensive
day at
park of
Paultons
the
Park?
trip.
Right. And then Klook was like, came through and I've only used Klook before I used it for Lottie World Adventure actually in Seoul. Because there was some package deal that was just for Americans on there or whatever, like outside of Korea. Point in case is I have only ever used it for a theme park once before, and then there was a deal on there, and it was like too good to be true. Even though it was still very expensive, and it still cost more than Drayton Manor, or it still cost more than Blackpool.
It
It
costs more
was
than
still
Alton
a good
Towers.
deal.
It
Yeah,
costs
so
more than any
we
other
did it.
park
It
on
was wild.
land.
But it is quality. I did feel like, all right, when I left there, I didn't feel like I wasted my money. I felt like, wow, okay, this was a really polished experience. Very nice. I am probably not the target audience of Paultons Park. Obviously, I'm not a kid. I'm not here for Peppa Pig. Because Peppa Pig's world overran with like a million children. That's not for me. But if you are like a rich kid or a rich family, like, yeah, I would spend my money on going to the nicer park. It's worth the money, in my opinion.
Like when we bought the tickets, I'm like, okay, this is expensive, whatever. When we go to the park, we do Kerber first. We make our way over, do dinosaurs. We walk through the gardens. We walk through the animal exhibits. We walk through Peppa Pig. And you get to Tornado Springs, and it's like, okay, this is why. This is why.
Game
This is
changer.
why they charge what they charge. Because like I could have stayed in Tornado Springs all day.
I agree. And there is a lot to do because you have the two roller coasters. You got the car ride, you got the train ride, you've got the
The
water
tractors,
slides, then there's the tractors, and then there's that pendulum swinging
yeah, Zamperla
swinging ride.
30.
Like I forgot the name of that ride. I should have really looked this up. I'm sorry, but
I think they have don't they have like little kiddie drop towers there too or something? Like
I can't
there was
recall
like a
now.
bunch. There's just like a bunch of rides in that
Bunch of
area.
rides, yeah,
Felt like
and this
its
it
own
all
little mini park, just like Peppa
it
Pig
all
World.
worked so well together. Yeah, there
Mini.
really is like a mini park. Like talk about a themed land.
Uh-huh.
US or like major Disney and Universal parks love to build a whole land, but really it's like a thematic area with like
One
a singular
ride.
attraction or
Yeah.
like a bee, like maybe like a B tier kind of sideshow. But this is one of those things where like I feel like everything in the area felt equally as important, and in the restaurants and whatnot and the food stands, it was like a very healthy, lively area with lots to do. Like lots to do. I kind of love like it's the same as the Lost Kingdom area. It's like all right, you got 3 roller coasters and then a water ride and then and a flat rides and kiddie
And like
jeep
activities and stuff,
ride.
playgrounds and panning for gold and that kind of stuff. Like little kids love that kind of stuff. There's like just various extracurriculars around. Little
I will say the
activities.
last area we visited was actually Peppa Pig because we had lunch and then we did the Zero coaster and that's kind of original and kind of themed to Alice in Wonderland, which
Oh yeah, the
wasn't
caterpillar.
it wasn't terrible, wasn't great. It was just kind of definitely older Paultons Park, And then we went to the Peppa Pig's
Corner, which
world
is the area that coaster's in, was kind of their first time like experimenting
with
with a
theming.
themed area, and
Yeah.
it was like during the Peppa Pig era where they were like, well, maybe we should do themed. Now we have a themed area in this traditional park with no themes. Like maybe it's time to retcon some themes onto this park, and that was kind of their first foray beyond the Peppa Pig stuff. And then Lost Kingdom was like their first like real major attempt at doing something like that in the post Peppa Pig era.
And of course, it worked out super well for them. But now, having walked into Peppa Pig as like the last area of the day, you could tell there was substance, lots of rides. It was very popular, lots of kids. But to me, it just did not even feel at the quality of the Lost Kingdom and Tornado Springs.
Yeah.
Which was very interesting to me because, like, all right, of course, everyone's hanging out here because Peppa Pig is Peppa Pig and she's definitely the ticket seller of the park. But I started realizing that they took that as a jumping off point. They took that as in like a transitional area. And they've improved upon their own capabilities. And it's kind of nice to see. I mean, I almost wish there was more people hanging out in other areas of the park. But of course, the target audience is still Peppa Pig aged. And I will say they're probably not ready for stuff like, Flight of the Pterosaur, which is the, suspended coaster, or, the spinning coaster. But either way, it was kind of fun to see that what their claim to fame is not even the best thing in the park. In fact, I would say it's maybe like it's top 3, but it's probably not for long. Next year, they'll probably be like in the 4th spot.
Yeah.
Peppa Pig World. I guess just to kind of touch on that. Lots to do, lots to see. A little bit sterile to me, but it's a cartoon-based area, so there's not much except for very rudimentary pink, white, and green, blue, and it's not for me.
There are some cute rides. It's got the elevated carriage ride and like the little Mac spinny boat ride. Those were added in 2018. I will say another thing I like about Paultons Park is they don't leave good enough alone. Every themed area in the park has had at least one expansion. And the dinosaur area was the log flume that actually was new last year. Tornado Springs was a 2-year process. So like in 2021 was when Storm Chaser opened and Farmyard Fire didn't open until 2022. Peppa Pig World opened in 2011, but then got an expansion in 2018. And then of course, like the area with Cobra in it and the disco and stuff is about to be completely overhauled and turned into something different. And they've already teased that it'll be a multi-year project and that the first phase opens next year. And the water ride that they're teasing will be a second phase. They just love to go back and reinvest in these areas and find ways.
But with these areas being as big and as grand as they are now turning into with the expansion of Peppa Pig World and the double expansion of the Cobra Land, this is going to be like a major destination park in a few years because I'm sure not going to stop there and they got space. But also when you look at their lineup, it's already, I think, easily a full day park. Like we weren't necessarily a target audience, so for us, we were able to kind of spend like half a day there and be good because we did go there at opening. But if you are there with kids, I mean, coaster wise alone, there's so much to do. Every area has a lot of little rides to do. I think this really could even be like in the future a 2-day park. There's like a little hotel nearby. I wonder if they're ever gonna open their own campground. Maybe they have their own campground or something. But I can see this turning in. Yeah, I can see this turning into a multi-day destination because people stay at Legoland, but I find there to be more to do at Paultons Park already than at like Legoland Windsor, which I think are kind of like similar target audiences. You know,
I don't think Chessington is as substantial as Paultons Park is now.
I agree. Chessington, of course, feels a little bit grander, but it doesn't necessarily have. Paultons Park is really moving along quick. I really think that once the Viking area is done with the 2 major new attractions that are adding, this really could be at least a 2-day park if you're really enjoying the park, if you're taking the time to enjoy the park.
Sites set on like the most coasters at any park in the UK.
Which is crazy to think about it, Paultons Park. That is crazy. And it's all pretty good quality. It's not like super filler stuff. And of course matches with the audience.
Sturdy rides. It's nothing that's reaching the end of its service life anytime soon.
Like, not hyper coasters, but they're quality and well-themed family coasters that weren't cheap as a project, you know? It doesn't feel cheap at any point in the park. And maybe Cobra, but besides that, you know.
Well, once it's the Raven, right? It's going to be the Raven, and then Dragon is the Eurofighter. Those are going to be great. It's going to look so good when it's done. I have so much faith in that project based on how Tornado Springs turned out.
Yeah, I agree. 100%. I think we should transition into the next part of the episode, and that's Drayton Manor.
Time to drive.
Of course, Paultons Park, you know, nothing but good things to say about it. Very excited for its future. I think it really is like the park to watch and the UK mainland outside of Great. You know, there's going to be a lot of watching parks now that Universal Great Britain's happening. But if we're going to talk about like a park that I think will accelerate way before the Great Britain Universal Park will even open at Paultons Park. It'll be interesting to see what Merlin's going to do, because of course Merlin's got quite the stronghold right now, despite their terrible operations and you know corporate tackiness. I think Universal coming to the UK will put some pressure on them, but Paultons Park, whether Universal's happening or not, was gonna be expanding and growing and becoming better and better. So I think we got to keep an eye on that. I'm very curious what the next 10 years hold for them. And then Drayton Manor, I'm actually equally as curious as to what will happen to them, because they seem to be in an upswing now. I think they've had the roughest behind them after the the incident with the child dying on the Rapids ride. Those were dark times, very dark times. Even though it turned out, wasn't it just the kid's fault? Wasn't the kid like standing up and getting into the river or something? What was it again?
Yeah. So the Rapids ride, a little girl alleged, I guess she stood up on the ride to avoid getting wet and then fell out of the boat, and then was like trying to wade around in the water somewhere to like get out of the water. And then she fell into a deeper portion of the flume and got stuck or something. It's very sad. But the Rapids ride was closed I thought the park was done after that, but just because it wasn't the park's fault, but the press was so bad, I thought the park was done because they were already not having a good time going into that. And then COVID happened, and I was like, it's a miracle to me that this park is where it is at right now, because I feel like there's been at least 2 or 3 times in the timeline where I would not have been shocked if it closed.
And the Rapids ride did reopen. And the nice thing about that is actually that they're using the same boats as Infinity Falls at SeaWorld Orlando. So now I was wondering, okay, did these new boats get designed for Drayton Manor because they're really hard to get out of? You know, they're pretty much guarded all the way around. And now, because they're so protective, they are also easy to use on water rides that are a lot more extreme, like Infinity Falls, where there's a giant drop, very extreme rapids. Like rides like Infinity Falls, like you better be staying in your boat because you will die, of course. But I don't exactly know which one came first boat-wise, and I may just be
Infinity
really
Falls
dumb right now. Infinity Falls, okay. Well,
yeah, because the
my whole
Rapids
theory here is fake. Okay.
The incident with the Rapids ride happened in 2017, and then the Rapids ride did not reopen until after COVID.
Okay. Well, scrap that.
Loopings, that's okay.
Okay.
I appreciated where you were
maybe
going
it was like a combination situation. Okay.
But yeah, so Loopings Group is who reopened the Rapids ride. and bought the new boats for it and stuff, because that was the first thing that they did when they acquired Drayton Manor in 2020, was working towards turning the existing park into themed areas. And Adventure Cove was the first area that opened beyond the existing Thomas Land area. And the Rapids Ride reopening and the G-Force roller coaster plot finally being, like, G-Force being demolished, well, not demolished, taken apart, and that being redeveloped, and then putting the Wave Swinger ride in there. The new Wave Swinger ride and the reopening of the Rapids Ride and retheming of the Rapids Ride was the anchor for the new area, Adventure Cove. And then they've continued to add to that area with redeveloping Shockwave into the Wave and so on and so forth. But yeah, let's talk about it. Let's talk about Drayton. I love Drayton Manor. I love this park. I went in 2015. It was a childhood bucket lister of mine because I always thought that the Shockwave looked really cool. Drayton Manor, Alton Towers, and Blackpool Pleasure Beach are always going to be like the trio in my mind, because all three of these parks built major, like, limit pushing roller coasters in 1994. And as a child, I can remember, like, studying all three of these parks and the three major coasters that they built. It's fascinating to me to think about the way that at the same time that Alton Towers was building Nemesis, Drayton Manor just down the road was building Shockwave as, like, their answer to Nemesis. And obviously, I mean, I think most people prefer Nemesis, but I think Shockwave was absolutely still held its own and was a very.
I mean,
cool...
think about when Shockwave and Nemesis were a thing. Shockwave for the European market was still something that wasn't really seen. You're talking about like a looping stand-up coaster over river rapids. I mean, it was still super fucking cool. I mean, of course, Nemesis was also really fucking cool, but
yeah,
so was, Shockwave.
Yeah, Shockwave was absolutely held its own in the conversation, without a doubt, because I think they just did the right things that they needed to do. It's not a big ride. There's not a whole lot going on aside from, like, it's a drop, it's a vertical loop, it's a 0G roll, 2 corkscrews, and then you turn around, go back to the station. But that's just enough. That's what.
But also in that era, I mean, think about the impact that Python had on Efteling, right? That was Europe's first 4 inversion looper. In the States, you were seeing stuff that was probably much grander and bigger at that point. But in Europe, the market wasn't quite that heavy yet on loopers. So even in the era of Shockwave, it was still a very significant ride. Like, how many super crazy loopers were there at that point? Not that many. A lot of the European, like, looper market is relatively young. There weren't really that many classic loopers like the US, where there was like 1 million aero loopers. I think it really was like a power move back when it opened.
Even looking at that, okay, so like 1994, this predated Mantis at Cedar Point, which was like the big stand-up coaster, like the big leap from like Iron Wolf type stand-up coasters into a mega stand-up coaster. So like, not only did Shockwave have the only 0G roll ever found on a stand-up coaster and the only double corkscrew ever found on a stand-up coaster, but it also had the most inversions of any stand-up coaster by a good margin, because up to that point, only 2 inversions had ever been found on a stand-up coaster. And even when Cedar Point opened Mantis, with its 4 inversions, it's obviously a longer ride, it does more things, it's more unique, but they didn't take the inversion record away from Drayton Manor, they tied it. I think it's just like, it goes back to saying that, like, objectively, like, Shockwave was a great ride for Drayton Manor and for the region, but even around the world, objectively, Shockwave would have been impressive anywhere. It could have done really well at any park. So it's really cool that it was a Drayton Manor project. It was designed in conjunction with the River Rapids ride, which of course is also an Intamin project. It was opened in 1993. And Shockwave has this great support superstructure that, like, the 0G roll, like, flies over the last big portion of the Rapids ride flume before it funnels into the lift hill and back into the station. And the station for the Rapids ride, with the turntable station for it, is directly underneath the station for Shockwave. And when you're standing in Shockwave station, it's a wooden plank station floor. And when you're standing there, you can look through the cracks in the floor and see the turntable for the Rapids ride spinning below you. It's just
I
a
kind
neat
of
rush.
love integration and stuff like that. I think it's super neat when like rides are co-designed, even if they're not open at the same time. If they're co-designed to be integrated like that, I love that kind of stuff. Like seeing the super wide support structure on Shockwave or now the Wave over the Rapids ride. It's like, yeah, clearly this was very much like one project. I love that kind of stuff.
Yeah. So as for Drayton Manor, like Drayton Manor is actually pretty old. It's 75 years old this year. It started as a zoo. It's kind of just like Alton Towers. It was a manor and a park, and then they started adding rides, and like that's just become like a classic thing. I think for a lot of like British parks, that's kind of like how they get their start. And up until the 90s, just like Alton Towers, they weren't doing a whole lot. Alton Towers was doing more with like thrill coasters and stuff and thrill rides, but they were kind of generic things like, the corkscrew and Schwarzkopf, like Jetstar rides and stuff. And then Drayton Manor was still just really mostly doing family rides. And the 90s was when they decided, once Alton Towers had kind of started doing themed rides and major rides and custom coasters, Drayton Manor, to the best of their ability, rose to the occasion. Because in 93, they did the Rapids ride. 94 was Shockwave, of course. 1996, both of these parks, even though they're in the same city, basically, both of them opened Vacula Madhouses with respective themes that were sort of related to the history of the manors that they are located in. And then 1998, of course, we saw Oblivion at Alton Towers. And then for what I think was a direct response to Oblivion, Drayton Manor opened Apocalypse. Originally Intamin 4-sided giant drop model, but then they added a fifth side to it somehow.
I mean, even aesthetically, they were kind of similar. Like if you look at the colors and the arrows and the orange, and it was like clearly it was like one is a major drop tower, something that the world hadn't quite seen before, and then there was like a drop coaster that also the world hadn't quite seen before. And in a way, I must even say that in hindsight, the more thrilling ride really was Apocalypse. I mean, come on, drop towers, stand-up drop towers, those are terrifying things.
I think it was like a big fuck you to Alton Towers because, of course, Alton Towers has
do the tall thing,
and Drayton Manor doesn't.
Yeah.
And so they were like, fuck 100%. You guys, we're going to build the most terrifying drop tower ever built, and we're going to make it look like Oblivion. And it's going to actually blow people away and be very scary. I was
mad bummed that it was no longer around, to be honest with you. Because as a kid, growing up in Europe and not really doing parks in the UK, it was like, that was one of like, some of the legends of the park for me really were iconic. Apocalypse. And then their X-Coaster, which was called G-Force, I believe.
G-Force, yeah.
And like those, neither of them are there anymore, which is funny. But those were like the two like cool looking rides, like the crazy weird looking rides. Of course, like I wasn't probably appreciating Shockwave as much as a kid because it looked a little more traditional, despite it not being as traditional, but on paper, I wasn't as impressed by it. Now I'm really excited about what happened to it, though.
I think was their last attempt at like trying to stay afloat in the thrill market. I don't know if it was ever really working for them beyond the 90s because I feel like Apocalypse was really strong and really worked for them. But then it was 15 years. Oh, no, not 15, 5 years. 5 years later, they added G-Force, and it was not as successful and not as well liked and had mechanical issues, and people found it uncomfortable and short, and it was expensive, and it was just one of those things like, I think their issues with G-Force, and then later as Apocalypse was aging, I think the Thomas Land, like the success of Thomas Land, like really reprogrammed the park, and Looping's group was, I think, eager to follow through with this idea that like maybe being a family park that is a family focused park is what works better for Drayton Manor going forward, especially in the context of Alton Towers, because Alton Towers pulled so far ahead that Drayton Manor couldn't compete with Alton Towers trying to play the same game. So the way that Drayton Manor has made itself work was by focusing in a different direction than what Alton Towers is going to focus on. Obviously, Alton Towers has family rides and stuff too, but they're always going to be like a thrill coaster park. And that's not a game that Drayton Manor had to play to stay afloat. And it was just something I think that they realized along the way. They were having so many issues with the 3 major thrill attractions that they had. All of them needed major adjustments, and they were like, what's the point? Like, don't force it if it's not working. Don't spend millions of dollars on maintaining these thrill rides if everybody is coming here for Thomas the Tank Engine. So just roll with it, embrace it. And that's, I think, the first piece of the puzzle was G-Force closing, and then when Loopings took over, the cost issues of maintaining Apocalypse started to get really out of control, apparently. Like, at one point, they were only down to running 2 gondolas. Like, it needed millions of dollars to fix, and they were like, we're just not, it's, it's ran its course, the ride's 22 years old, like, it's time. And then they've just redirected focus on family attractions and kind of doing like the Paultons Park thing of like having lots of family coasters. And I think it's really working for them. I'll always fondly recall the like good 10, 12 years where Drayton Manor was a thrill ride park that was doing really limit pushing one of a kind things like Apocalypse and G-Force, but like the park is doing.
I mean, in a grand marketplace being located so close to Alton Towers, it just makes sense. They need to do something complete opposite.
Yeah.
And I think Loopings Group is on it, knows exactly what to do with it. And as a family park, it probably just works better. The Wave being like a much more family-friendly coaster now by having a way lower height limit, still being quite thrilling and incredibly smooth. It really goes to show that Giovanola was just the best track rater. If you ride Titan, you ride Goliath, you ride the Wave, you're riding these Giovanola manufactured coasters, they run so well. And every single time I do anything that is Giovanola made, I'm like, I wish this manufacturer wouldn't have ceased to exist so soon, because they were just honestly some of the best in the industry for a short time. And I really wish they would have had a chance to grow bigger. Can you imagine if Giovanola was like a high producing modern manufacturer? They would be like competing with B&M, like, they would have maybe even had such a big impact on the industry. I mean, it's hard to, I have a hard time explaining what I'm trying to say here about Giovanola, but the little things that they have done were all so high quality. And even now, 20, 25, 35 years later, the stuff that they have worked on runs like a dream. You go on any of their projects and it still runs like it's brand new. That's crazy. Like, you don't have that on B&M rides, you don't have that on Intamin rides, nothing does that.
I was like concerned with the Wave because, well, first of all, I thought it was a brilliant choice because since they lost G-Force was the replacement for their Pinfari looping coaster, which predated Shockwave. And it's sort of like a natural step process of like having a family coaster and then having like a traditional looping coaster and then having like a stand-up coaster or an inverted coaster or some sort of gimmicky thing. But without G-Force, it left the park with a bunch of family coasters and a stand-up coaster, which was like this huge jump in like pedigree and intensity, and like it just became way more niche than what the new era for Drayton Manor was going to accommodate. And so they employed art engineering and built this new train, bright yellow, just like the original stand-up train that was in all the promotional work for Shockwave. And the train is genius. It is smooth, it's comfortable, it's accommodating. Like you said, lowering the height requirement was exactly what they needed to focus on, because they took this oddball stand-up coaster that was like cool objectively, but also like garnered a lot of mixed reactions because it's like it's a stand-up coaster with first generation Intamin Giovanola trains. They were not comfortable.
Also, let's face it, making a coaster with like 4 versions of family coaster in 2025 is not that strange of a thing.
You can do it. Yeah.
Because like kids are down to ride inverting coasters now. Like back when Shockwave opened, it was like the big thrilling kind of thrill machine. But now kids are not as fazed by that. Like there's inverting coasters all over the place. So making it like turning what was previously a really thrilling ride and maybe not as thrilling these days, and then turning it into a family ride makes it like a really good family ride, like a very good family coaster.
Yeah. When we rode it, I just like we got back at the station. I was like, this is a slam.
It was high on our list. It's
Slam dunk.
comfortable train designs for tall people, big people, no matter what, right? It runs like a dream. It articulates very well because, of course, there's a couple of kinks in the track, the older design stuff, at the little straightaway, and the transition between the corkscrews is quite rapid. But the way that it runs and not having any shoulder harnesses and just the lap bars, and the trains are the exact same as the ones found on Cannibal at Lagoon in Utah. So they're great trains that Art Engineering has worked
Engineering,
on.
yeah.
Yep,
This
Art
is
Engineering.
officially an Art Engineering stan account because after riding the wave, I was like,
No, but now I'm thinking of all the rides that have this track gauge, or even don't have the track gauge, because obviously the track gauge on Cannibal and Lagoon is like different. It's a whole
totally
different track
different.
type, right?
Yeah,
But
totally
so like
different.
clearly they're applying this train type and they're
Mhm.
making it work for several kinds of track. So I'm like, all right, Art Engineering, I can draft you a little list of clients because I know plenty of parks that could really benefit of putting these on there. And I'm not
Let me ask you this.
volunteering.
Like, would you
Yes.
agree that the wave was a more successful transfer into its new identity than like
I know where
any
you're
of
going.
the
Yes.
M floorless coaster
Yes, I
conversions?
was about to say,
Rougarou,
like,
Patriot, Firebird. The
oh my
wave
God.
was more successful. It's a better
Of course,
ride
and
than
of
any of
course,
those.
it doesn't have that like floorless edge to it, but it does have the fact that it's just lap bars, so there's still a lot
Yeah.
of freedom and it's very roomy. But man, the way that it tracks is so good that I would have, I mean, if you would have put this on Patriot, I just think the marketability of it is not as good.
Better.
Saying it's floorless just sells better, I think,
Mhm.
but it would have ran better, no doubt. In Firebird, Patriot, obviously Rougarou. Though I do like Rougarou a bit of as a
I do love
floorless
Rougarou as
because
a
you like
roller
swing on it
coaster.
a lot of swingy
But
moments.
like
And
riding
I
the wave and then imagining these trains, these Art Engineering trains on Rougarou, I'm like, oh, that would have been perfect.
one thing I
So
do
well.
hope, and it's not realistic, but Carowinds, Daddy Carowinds, whoever's in charge right now, like Daddy Caro, if you listen to me, Vortex can be saved by
Yeah.
putting these art trains on it.
I don't want to see
No doubt.
Vortex
Come on.
go away. I would love for it to be a stand-up coaster forever because it's kind of like the
No,
last.
babe, let it go.
But man, if they had to do it, these Art Engineering trains is the way to go. It is the way.
Let's talk about the wave a little bit more then, because so first of all, the theme is of course like surfing now, which I don't know exactly what the wave theme was
So
before
it's
when it was
always
Shockwave.
originally that area with the rapids, right, was like a fishing town theme, like a Nordic
Okay.
fishing town with like the brightly colored buildings and stuff, but like very rustic. They lost a little bit of that when they did the flume ride, which is themed to the national, like it's themed to. I have notes of it here. We'll talk about it in a sec. But the theme area of the two Intamin rides, the Rapids ride and Shockwave, were like themed to a fishing town. And then with Adventure Cove, they kind of leaned into it a little bit, but then they were like, okay, instead of it being like a fishing town, it's a surf city. It's a surfing town. It's like sort of what they did with the Calamity Bay or Calamity Island or whatever at Fort Park, but like less foreboding. The theme is, rough waters, thrilling whitewater adventures, whether it's the Rapids ride or the, riding the roller coaster, riding the wave, like that's become the new theme. And like as far as Shockwave is concerned, like I when I wrote it in 2015, obviously the area made no sense. I think the Adventure Cove retheme of the area, it looks great, and redoing the wave and doing the trains and remarketing the ride was like a great way to expand on what they did in 2021 when they reopened the Rapids ride. But I just want to say, like, for anybody wondering, like, I loved Shockwave when it was a stand-up coaster, and I'm really glad that I got to ride those Intamin Giovanilla trains because that was the last opportunity for me to do that. And now they're all gone. They were not comfortable. I didn't particularly enjoy the fact that it was a stand-up coaster because of how uncomfortable the trains were, but I was glad to say that I did it. And now I think the ride is objectively better as an overall experience because I think the intensity of the ride is really maintained. The whippiness of the zero-G roll and the tightness of the corkscrews and stuff. It's all still...
Oh yeah, because if you sit in the wings on these, the whippiness of the zero-G roll is just like exactly what you would hope for.
Yeah.
And the corkscrews are whippy and it's whizzy. And then well, maybe my favorite part, and this is just probably a complete nerd statement, but there's two favorite parts to me. One of the favorite parts is when like you drop off the lift and you had that small little drop into pretty much like a tight turn that becomes another drop. I love how it's split up. And then you had that straight section between the 0G roll and the corkscrews where you're just like blowing towards that billboard that's cut out, like a nice theming thingy they did.
Yeah.
And then you blow into the corkscrews. Could have been anything. Could have been a hill. Could have been nothing. But it's just a straight section of track. I feel like they used to do that a lot more than they do now. I kind of love that moment. But I really do like this ride, though, because when Alex and I were like driving around the UK, we're like, every day it was a game to stay awake in the car because we'd be kind of tired. And I'd be like, we were driving. And the game was, okay, we're going to now rank every coaster ridden this day. We're going to rank it in the grand scheme of the UK. And maybe on the last episode of this series, we'll release
how we
the
rank
top 75.
the 75 coasters.
The 75 coasters, exactly. Mm-hmm. But for the first couple of days, I mean, Shockwave was holding up. It was holding up.
Yeah.
Because we did Shockwave. The Wave. Sorry, the Wave.
And then we did
the Wave the same
coasters.
Yeah, so we did the Wave the same day we did some Alton Towers coasters, and the Wave was still the end. They were like, well, the Wave was like a super highlight for us. And it still sticks out to me as being like an underdog coaster, one of those like really surprised me kind of rides. Like on the trip, there was a few rides that really kind of blew me away unexpectedly. I mean, I didn't expect to come ride the Wave and be like, wow, this is great. But it really was great. Like, it really is memorable for me.
I love the Wave the same way that I love a ride like Viper or a ride like Hyperspace Mountain in Disneyland Paris or Gultrix. Like, these rides just represent an era that is bygone. And like a ride like the Wave, like they just don't make them like that anymore. Like
there's a lot of character, a lot of classicness in it. Yeah. But I want to kind of do a quick loop around the park at this point.
Before
just because we're
to say two things.
We're already kind of reaching an hour, so we're going to
an hour. But it's really this is really the Wave show at Drayton Manor. There's not a whole lot else to talk about aside from attractions that are gone now.
Well, yeah, because let me just mention that, of course, people are going to think, Gold Rush. And Gold Rush was definitely like on the itinerary, but then big old Gold Rush decided that she wasn't going to rush no longer, and she valleyed. And she valleyed so hard that when we were there, the trains were just sitting there half covered. And then like weeks later, the trains were still sitting there half covered. And now they're going to talk about like how Gold Rush is going to come back, and they're going to kind of, I guess, relaunch it in a way, like no pun intended.
Whatever it takes.
So Gold Rush is an Intamin. It's like a cool intimate product where there's a lot of switch tracks and lift hills and launches where like you go first half of the day you go in one direction, the other half of the day you go another direction, but you also go forwards and backwards on every ride. I can barely even describe it, and I was quite looking forward to it. So we will come back for Gold Rush. But yeah, she was very sad. She was very valleyed. She was very not moving and sitting on the track.
She had a tarp over her train to keep her warm. At night.
A little blankie. Yeah, it was very sad. But okay, anyway, so let's do a quick loop around the park. So how do you start?
Yeah, so Adventure Cove it's really all about the Wave. They've got other flat rides and stuff. They have the Flume ride there is really cool. It is I told you it was an Intamin. I was wrong. It's not an Intamin. Storm Force 10 is a Bear Manufacturing Group Flume ride themed to the.
Oh, they did Mystic River Falls.
Right? No, that's Bar.
Oh. Oops, I thought you meant
Bar
and
Bear are two different.
Okay, oops.
But so
I tried.
Themed to the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, or at least it was. I don't think the sponsorship is intact anymore. But like the little lighthouse thingy that was in the middle of the ride that they tore down, that Loopings Group tore down, that was related to that. We didn't ride it this time because you get super fucking wet on that ride. Whether you're
it was also close on that trip. It never opened for the day. Remember?
Oh my god! It
may have opened after we left. But it was down the whole day.
Yeah, I wasn't. It's a cool ride. The best part is actually the very beginning where you dispatch out of the station and then a curtain comes down so that people in the station can't see what's happening to you, but then you're actually on like a tilt track and it dumps you down the first drop. And then there's a backwards drop, and then there's a double dip finale drop that goes right into the lake. And like what you're getting is lake water. It's like the real deal.
Nasty.
Rode it in 2015, loved it, but didn't need to ride it again because I was super fucking wet.
See, as a person that doesn't like getting wet on rides, I'm not even mad at
I was like, we don't need to do this. And then
it's gonna sound super super wild, but my like thing I was looking forward to the most was like literally Thomastown. Thomastown doesn't just sell for the kids, it sells for me too.
Yeah.
You tell me I can ride on Thomas the Tank Engine and Clarabelle and Anne, whatever, and like Toby is there and Harold the helicopter is there.
Terrence the tractor.
Troublesome Trucks. I didn't see the crazy Diesel 10 though, the scary one, but you know, it was a cute look. Like as a kid, I loved Thomas. Like a Thomas the Tank Engine.
Me too.
It was like a really, really pivotal part of my childhood.
I was so impressed with like, the area. It's beautiful.
Like the Fat Controller or Sir Topham Hatt, whatever they call them in America.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Henry stuck in a tunnel forever. Thomas riding into the freaking little house while they're having breakfast.
Oh my God.
These are like pivotal moments in my childhood.
Oh my God. That was one of my
You know? So then you're telling me I could walk into this little Thomas land. And like the first thing you see, because this land is actually quite well designed. The first thing you see when you walk in is the little turntable where every time Thomas or
Percy.
No, not Toby. Percy come over and then they park the little cars and they turn around and then they come back around to pick up the cars again. I mean, like, that is a childhood moment. And they use that as a meet and greet. So the little Thomas parks, right? The conductor gets out. He turns the turntable and there's kids standing around waiting. So he parks Thomas facing the kids, and his eyes are always moving, Thomas, right? He's always looking around. And the kids are waving, and it's like literally a Thomas meet and greet. That's also part of the ride. That's like has a very functional turntable. Yes. I mean, like, and that's the first thing you see when you walk into Thomastown or Thomas Land.
Yeah.
It's Thomas Land. Like the US ones were Thomastown, I think, but they don't live anymore.
Thomas Land.
And they were nothing like the one at Drayton Manor. And then they actually expanded it. Not much, but they expanded it this year or last year by adding a little Thomas Flume. Mm-hmm. I mean, like, that is the coolest thing. And then the Troublesome Truck roller coaster, that is actually like a very good family roller coaster. I rank it quite high because it's like dark ride. No, not even dark ride, like scenic ride / little roller coaster. Pungy, smooth, magnetic brakes, high quality. And then it's themed to being on a platform that is also in the train station where the Thomas and Percy trains park. So you're like on platform 3. The queue is on platform 2, I think. And then like Knapford Station. And then there are the Troublesome Trucks depart from platform 3. It's the cutest thing. This whole land is like a dream come true. So for me, Drayton Manor was like, you know, when like all these parks are really hinging on their like thematic kiddie areas with like a big IP attached. For me, Drayton Manor really was Thomastown and the Wave.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, come on, Thomastown had like a British look to it because, of course, the buildings were kind of brickish and like
all of the other areas.
Yeah, loved it.
The really well done ones, like the Nickelodeon area in Blackpool. It's just very bright. The color palettes are like very abrasive and very like.
Which usually kiddie areas are super bright. This is strangely
Thomastown is like
British,
beautiful,
you know,
just very natural looking. To recapture.
And I will say it felt like it was definitely like a little bit tired, not like under-maintained. It just felt like obviously this area's been around for a minute, and I can't remember the timeline on when Thomas Land opened.
2007.
But it is the legend of the park, you know? I mean, and it was so cute. The parents with their kids. I don't usually care about this kind of stuff. But maybe because I was a kid that loved Thomas so much. And I'm like, these kids are like loving Thomas, but I love Thomas. This is so cute. Yeah. I loved it. I had a great time. That was like so totally the highlight for me of that whole fucking park. I mean, that was the highlight.
And the Troublesome Trucks coaster.
And the Wave,
cool.
Of course.
For the record, it's one of only 2 Gerstlauer kiddie coasters ever built. The other one is at Motion Gate in Dubai. So this is a very unique
Is it the Smurf one?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the Smurf coaster? Am I thinking of something incorrectly?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So the park is also home to other stuff. Like, of course, Gold Rush, like I mentioned. There's a family boomerang from Vekoma, which is called
Accelerator.
It used to be Ben 10.
Yeah.
And like the queue is actually like the nicest, probably like the biggest, most detailed queue for a boomerang, Vekoma family boomerang.
Yeah.
Because the thematically makes no sense because now you're entering the Wild West and it's some experimental lab from some like steampunk dude from the Wild West area, but then it's also when you're inside like a car garage and like a robotic car situation. And then the ride broke down and I never saw what else came after that because we actually bounced. I never got the cred. Alex got the cred as Ben 10, right? You've written as Ben 10? I was like, we have to come back for Gold Rush anyway. Let's just head to Alton Towers because like we're gonna come back for Gold Rush. It's actually quite high on my to-do list. I like the Wave a lot. I love Thomastown or Thomas Land.
There's a lot to come.
So like, surely Drayton Manor is in our future. Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna wait in line for an extra hour or whatever because the line was really long.
Yeah,
just to see if the boomerang comes back up. And of course, we saw the boomerang running before we left. But we have things to do. We'll come back for the Boomerang and the Red Gold Rush over there.
Yeah, that's pretty much the park. I mean, there's the Viking
there's
area,
the mini Viking area
which
that
is
has
cute.
the powered coaster. It's cute. It's good.
That's
Operations were actually not great.
That's a loopings project of like redoing that area into Vikings, and the kiddie coaster, the powered coaster that's been there for a very long time, the Zamperla 1987. It used to be the Buffalo coaster. Now it's called Jamandor or something. It has some crazy name. Yeah,
I didn't even know how to read it.
Kind of a pain in the ass. That's a cute area. And then they have just a few more rides around that aren't part of an area yet. And then they have like the Wild West.
But there will be, Wild West area. Yeah, the Wild West area is a little bit phony. I do think that
it's not.
I think the family Boomerang that used to be Ben 10. Now it's called Accelerator. They gotta recolor it because it has the same like neon green and like the little red light poles on it. I know it's themed to like an experiment from some steampunk professor doctor in Mr. Frontierland, but Frontier Falls. But I think they need to
progress. There's some stuff.
Yeah,
but it's all good.
I love this about certain parks. It's like you can really tell that this park is and the upswing. You can really tell, like, all right, they're investing in themselves, they're retheming areas, like the worst is behind them. And I've seen parks really hit rock bottom before. Like when I was a kid, of course, I grew up with Warner Brothers Movie World Germany, and then the licensing got dropped, and then Star Parks took over, and who the frill is even Star Parks, right? And then all the licensing got dropped, and then they had all these skeletons of these amazing Warner Brothers themed rides that were now themed to something that was completely not related to anything, and there were no real franchises in that park, and it just felt like the soul of that park just got ripped out. And so every time Move Park Germany does something, and people are really critical of Move Park Germany, but every time they do something, like I've seen that park rock bottom. Like I visited the year that the licensing dropped, and that park just had like, it just felt like there was no soul. It was like just made up characters.
Absolutely.
And then they added Nickland, that was like the first Renaissance, and then they added, eventually it started working with, they did Van Helsing, and then it's Star Trek, and then they did, of course, Movie Park Studios. And so, like, they really, like, every time they do something like that, I am so happy in my heart because, like, they are on the upswing and they've been on the upswing. And I feel that way about Drayton Manor because Lubin's Group is good at fixing parks, I think. Like, they just know exactly what they're doing with these parks. They're trying to be the biggest and the best. They know how to maintain smaller parks. And then we went to Pleasurewood Hills, which is also not part of Lupin's Group. I had that same feeling. I'm starting to learn that I'm like a really big appreciative person of Lupin's Group.
Absolutely.
Because there's parks that are cheating death repeatedly, or these family parks that are just, the families are just not running them anymore. Like it's just, the industry's changed and it's not what it used to be. And then Lupin grabs these parks and they're all like this little format. They're like small but very well-rounded parks. And they just managed to keep them alive and reinvest in them and kind of bring them up to like a really respectable status to me. These parks would totally have failed without Lupin Group. So maybe I'll do like a little Lupin Group special episode one day. I'm starting to feel like,
just in the Netherlands alone, they've got 2 great parks.
Yeah, because like for work, I'm in the Netherlands, of course, a lot, and then of course it's Hellendoorn that I grew up with, which has been Lupin's for a while. But then Drievliet, which is near The Hague, like our capital, like our political capital of the country, and I'm in that area a lot, and and seeing the changes coming and like getting a mascot and getting a new logo and songs and dance and seeing retheming to on their Formula X coaster from Formula X, which is their Mauer launch Lupin coaster. It really gets me very excited. I'm going to go back and just visit, I think, for shits and giggles on my own just someday soon, because I'm there so often. I have time to just wander into the park and scope it out and just see what upgrades are coming, because from the videos and stuff, the park looks to be in even better shape than it was. And Drievliet was never in that bad shape to begin with, I don't think. But anyway, Lupin Group, I think, is a super underrated operator that we only recently really started appreciating. In the UK trip, Drayton Manor and Pleasurewood were like, okay, this park's really, you can sense that there's some love that goes into these places, some appreciation, hard work, and they're not necessarily on a downward trajectory anymore. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I probably talked too much now. You can continue.
That's okay. No, I was just thinking, I have I know like how we start our episode with like a did you know? I actually have another one for this episode. It's something that I was like preparing myself, the show notes for this episode, and then found something that just I was really tickled by. I guess there were two things that I had no idea about when I was looking at Drayton Manor that I was like, wow, that's bizarre. First one was about Apocalypse and how the ride opened with 4 gondolas, and then they retconned the ride, like they moved the 4 gondola towers closer together so that they could accommodate a 5th one. And that 5th gondola tower...
So you're telling me they tripped... So you're telling me that they took the big tower and they stripped the tracks off of it.
Yes.
Which just should be relatively easy because they're just bolted in. And then just moved them all close together and it added a 5th in the back.
Yeah.
Fascinating. I didn't know that.
So it opened with 2 sit-down sides and 2 stand-up sides with a floor. And I don't know if...
And then they built that standard tilting one that was floorless, right?
One. Yeah, like
acrophobia and high fall.
And acrophobia.
Yeah.
I don't even know if there was another installation of the stand-up version without the floor.
Doesn't Huracan Condor do that in Spain? Doesn't it also have 2 sit-downs? Didn't it used to have ones with standing floors?
I'm not sure.
Now it has the tilted ones.
One. Remember they had
a sit-down tilt on, a stand-up tilt one, and then a regular sit. I need to look this up.
I did the floorless one, so it's actually kind of cute. In 2022, the ride had only been open for 2 years, but they marketed the floorless stand-up drop gondola as a new attraction called the 5th Element, which I thought was very clever because it's like the 5th gondola. I didn't actually ride it on my 2015 visit because it's so similar to like acrophobia and stuff. But I did ride the floor, like the standing version with the floor, and it's essentially the same, except that you can just like stand on the floor or you can kick your legs out. And actually thought the standing version with the floor was more comfortable. And as far as I know, unless Huracan Condor had the standing floor gondola, I don't know if any other drop tower had the like floor for the stand-up version. But that's just what's so funny about Drayton Manor. It's like, of all the things, like, I had a nickel for every time Drayton Manor built an e-ticket ride where the gimmick was standing up and it was built by Intamin. Like, I'd have 2 nickels. The other thing...
go
ahead.
Go ahead.
Well,
go ahead.
The other funny thing, and actually you reminded me of it when we were talking about Dreamfleet and Formula X, because that is the same ride system as G-Force that ran at Drayton Manor. Right. And Loopings Group acquired Drayton Manor while G-Force was still standing. It was standing but not operating for the 2018 season and the 2019 season, and it was actually Loopings Group that disassembled it. And it's in storage. And the internet just says that it's in storage in the Netherlands, but it doesn't say where. And I'm guessing that it's in storage at Dreamfleet because it's actually...
But they just acquired Dreamfleet in 2024, though.
Oh, then maybe not. It just says the Netherlands.
Which is why I was so excited, because there's so many changes. Now they have a new character called Daan Pelikaan, which is a super cute little name. And, of course, the park is actually quite close to the beach. And, because all the parks have, like, a big character. Like, there's the bear at Hellendoorn, for example. So, if it's in storage in the Netherlands, it could very well be related to Hellendoorn, because Hellendoorn has been part of the Looping Group for a while.
Yeah. Well, in any case...
Hellendoorn... I mean, I would love that for Hellendoorn. That'd be honestly kind of a cool expansion, wouldn't it?
The ride, I will say, so in any case, the future of G-Force is very interesting because the ride is for sale, you guys. If you've got a spare...
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh.
For 695,000 euros, you can buy G-Force.
That's
it? For sale right now, yeah.
Oh, wow, that's cheap.
Yeah, 695 euros.
Cheap Force.
It is for sale for at rides.com. And I think that's just the broker that Loopings Group is using to sell the ride. But now that they've acquired Dreamfleet, I wouldn't be surprised if they just used it as a parts donor for Formula X because all those trains...
Well, they could do that. They could also... Maybe they'll erect it again at some point. Because the Netherlands is quite a competitive market. I mean, there's a lot of parks. Duinrail is like practically walking distance from Dreamfleet. When you drive from Dreamfleet, just within an hour, you can reach Toverland. Okay. You have 30 minutes, you can reach Efteling. You've got Hellendoorn, of course, already there. You've got Sahara and Hellendoorn are close together. You've got the indoor theme parks that are opening in Bommelwereld indoor theme park. The Netherlands is incredibly dense for theme parks. I mean, this is the size of Southern California, if not smaller. And this place is packed with theme parks. Walibi Holland's there. Maybe who knows what they're thinking of doing.
Like, that wouldn't
be
beyond the realm of possibility, in my opinion.
I mean, they built another reuse coaster. They're good at that. Ridderstrijd that they got from La Feria that you wrote.
Oh,
and
yeah.
hurt your arm on.
The
Yeah,
spinning mouse.
that one.
The one that I dislocated my wrist on.
But yeah, so like, most of this episode was really just kiddie areas and kiddie lands, because all of Paultons Park is pretty much kiddie lands, and then of course Thomas Land is like the showcase.
Yeah.
And I want to end this episode with this little tidbit that I found, and now I have a new dream on my wish list. So I was just like casually Googling Thomas Land and Drayton Manor to make sure I actually called it the right thing, because the Thomastown was like in Kennywood and like some of the cigarette sparks at Thomastown for a while. And I was like, am I like using the wrong name? But no, it is indeed still Thomas Land in Drayton Manor. And then I came across this photo that you will not be able to see right now because you're listening to this probably like on Spotify or something. But it is the Christmas time, Thomas Land at Drayton Manor. And Thomas has antlers and a bunch of lights, and there's like Christmas trees in the station. And it is like somehow like drawing some sort of emotion out of me here that I'm like super stoked. And now I want to ride Thomas the train at Drayton Manor for Christmas someday.
All right.
If I make this into a video, you guys can see it on the screen right now. But if I don't, you'll have to just imagine or Google it.
Oh my God.
I mean, like, isn't that the cutest thing? So yeah, that's what I'm going to be thinking about for the rest of the day, is that I just want to go and ride Thomas the Tank Engine in Thomas Land at Drayton Manor for Christmas. A British little Christmas vibe. You know?
Yes.
Why is that how I'm ending the episode? This wasn't even planned, but I just
That's so great.
felt a certain way about this.
We both had a did you know for the end of the episode, and it wasn't even really planned.
Yeah. I didn't even know the park was open to winter. Surely no other than Christmas in July. It's not in America.
Either.
So yeah. So with that, we're gonna kind of wrap up this episode. It's already running a little bit longer than I expected it to run. This is episode 2 in the series that is the Great British Road Trip. We will be talking about a lot more parks coming up. We're probably going to do a couple episodes in between that are not the UK, because we just did 2 UK episodes in a row. So maybe we'll talk a little bit more China. I know China is not everyone's favorite. It doesn't do as well. But of course, we travel to China a lot. We hit our 30 theme parks in China, so we're going to have to talk about it at some point. And we did go to a couple of really cool parks. So we will probably have a China episode in between. If not, who knows what the next episode is. Be my guest and guess. But yeah, so wherever you're listening, which is probably Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, those are the big 3. Please leave us 5 stars. Leave a little review. That would really help us out. And our social media is kind of where we share all the photos. We have thecoasterkings.com, where we also share photos that are related to the episodes, if you want to look at some photography. But Instagram and Facebook for the Coaster Kings, you'll find a lot of cool photos and kind of like opinion pieces, almost like in a diary kind of format about these parks that we're talking about on the podcast. So definitely check us out there. Give us a follow. We're almost 20,000 followers on Facebook, actually. Maybe as of the launch of this, we're already there. We're actually like only 200 or 300 away. So if not, help us get there and give us a like, give us a follow on Facebook. And I will stop talking now, and we'll get you guys on that episode soon. Bye.
Bye.